Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review A Clockwork Orange. Really, a lot of people immediately would go into this film of like, man, this movie is so disturbing or so dark or so whatever. And then really I'd be going on and like, well, like, I watched this movie ahead of time a while back. And then all of a sudden I've more recently seen this show called Euphoria, and I watched the whole first season of Euphoria. I'm like, man, it seems like they have some like really like reoccurring bizarre things in that show. And so after kind of looking back on this movie, I was like, you know what? Like, go and watch the first season of Euphoria, then come back here, and then still just like, yeah, like this show is much more darker than anything else. Like, when really looking at it, it seems that there is a number, a very short list, but a number of movies and shows that go on and have things that are being put in this film to put in any number of other things. You can go on and both watch A Clockwork Orange and, of course, Euphoria, both on HBO Max currently right now. Um, Really, I would probably say that there is something creative about this movie. There's a certain kind of style, there's a certain kind of artsy way that this movie goes on and presents itself. Uh, but I don't condone, or I don't go on and uh, like would say that I had um, any kind of real like, I don't feel like this is a bad movie, but I can't like want to go on and say that this is a good film or recommend it, even though I conveniently could tell you where exactly is it is to watch this film. uh I would say that this movie is like interesting. It's interesting, it's dark, it's gritty. There's quite a few scenes where, of course, we have one gender that is to be attacked by a number of other genders, to be very vague about what I just meant there. Um, like, one person against a group of people seems to be a theme, or not a theme, but it seems to be a consistent kind of thing in this film. Because we have it to where this movie has to deliver ultra violence. And so, but teeing up, what is this movie about? So we have a guy who is to be called Alex, who, after going on and consistently being a party to a gang that is to seek out this thing called ultra violence, Alex eventually goes on to be forced to go to prison, where he all of a sudden is to seek this thing called treatment from this thing called a Ludovico treatment. And I'm probably butchering and not saying that correctly. Uh, but within this treatment, all of a sudden Alex is to kind of be forced to have this turnaround where he all of a sudden is to become ill anywhere where violence or any kind of declothing of any point is happening at some part of this film. And so, like, we have a real journey with this character, and we have some very dark and gritty like things going on to it also. Like, I can't help but like, I think people would go on and do papers and stuff like that, going and talking about the one scene where Alex is to go on and do something, of course, with scissors, which I'm not going to go much into. But then while he's doing that, all of a sudden he is singing a song called Singing in the Rain, which doesn't really match with what he's doing, and is to just be this kind of weird, um, kind of like why would somebody like see this kind of music as like a ramp up to go on and do something hurtful is just kind of very weird. Um, Kind of like when we would go on, and if anybody is to uh, know the WWE wrestler or former wrestler Mick Foley. Not that this movie has any connection to the, like, just follow me here. So Mick Foley, before he used to go on and wrestle for WWE, when he, of course, was able to do so, we had Mick Foley that would go on and listen to like Mary Poppins and classical music and all kinds of stuff before going out and wrestling. And it was like, okay, like, so a lot of people would be very baffled and confused by this guy's kind of musical choice before he would go on and wrestle. Kind of like how we would go on here and have that kind of that singing the rain kind of scene. Doesn't quite match this scenario or whatever, but it's a kind of unique, one of a kind song choice to kind of use in kind of weird times of sort. So, with that said, that kind of covers in a roundabout way what technically goes on into this movie. So I think I'm just going to go on and go into spoilers about this film. So I would have to say that grading wise, like, I wouldn't say that this is a bad movie, but I can't say that it's like a good film. So I would probably have to go in the very middle route, just say that this movie is interesting, even though really there are points about this movie where a lot of people would just be like, why did you even review this? Why did you even talk about this film? How dare you? How could you? Because when you look at a number of other shows and other different things, when you look at this, like there's like at least like there's approach about this film that I'm just kind of like I'm kind of caught by. Like I'm just like, and plus also, why is it that the Simpsons, in one of their Halloween episodes, we had Bart Simpson who has dressed as this character in one of their Halloween episodes. Why? Obviously, Bart could not be able to watch this film, and so I think it's kind of one of uh, the kind of the artists kind of having fun with this character to maybe have the adults that are watching on along with the show go on and be like like somebody's doing something. So yeah, so with that said, let's go out of our way to double five this up. Let's just go into this thing called spoilers. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time I get to spoil this movie. Um, Really, it's very for me. I know it's not for you, for whenever you're watching this, but it's like it's kind of in the ninth inning of things, to where I'm just like, very long day. So I apologize if I don't have a good enough voice. I don't have the good enough um, verbiage or words to be able to spit out here to talk about this movie. I'm just kind of trying to get to the end of my day and call it a wrap. But thank you for watching this. Thank you for going on and viewing this if that's what you eventually end up doing at some point. So, thank you. Let's go on to spoilers. So, the very beginning of this film, we of course have a consistent narration done by Malcolm McDowell. one thing that I'll kind of make note is Malcolm at some point was to, I think, scratch his corneas or cornea while doing this film, especially that whole torture scene where his eyes are consistently open and he's like, "Oh my god!" Like getting drops in his eyes consistently. At one point, I think he messed up his cornea, his eye, um, while doing that scene, because eventually he just like he couldn't take it anymore. So Alex, of course, in the very beginning of this movie, is to be with his droogs, as he calls it. Of course, Georgie, Dim, and Pete. And so we have these members that are, of course, at uh, this milk bar, and so it seems that these guys are to pour these things of milk through a very creative way through these women who are statues. And so we have Alex who's to say that this milk is kind of getting them ready for the night's activities. So as this gang is to make their way out of this bar, we all of a sudden have it where there's this homeless man that is consistently singing this song. And so all of a sudden we of course have these Alex and his gang who of course are kind of listening to this guy just kind of hiccuping and burping and whatever after drinking a number of bars, um, bars of music, but also alcoholic beverages. And bars of music? Don't you mean bars of notes upon a musical sheet? Yeah. Um. So this guy, of course, is to ask for a Cutter Me Brothers. Basically, this guy is to beg for money from all these people who are to be strangers, but he's calling them brothers oddly. Uh, so Alex is to be the first one who kind of smacks this guy, and so this homeless guy is to know where things are going, and he's begging these guys to, like, you know what, like, if you're gonna go on and beat me, you might as well beat me to death. Like, get me off this mortal coil and like kind of get me out of here. If you guys are gonna beat me, you might as well beat me to death. And so the rest of the guys kind of join in and smack this guy up pretty good, and then they leave to go on and continue with the night's activities. So these guys go on into this car and they're driving so fast, they're starting to play chicken with everybody on the road, where we just immediately have a number of motorcycles, cars, and whatever that are crazily driving out of the way to crash. And so we have this car that stops in front of this house. And so Alex, of course, is to make his way to desperately bang on this door and ask these people, like, hey, like, this is a matter of life or death. Like, my friend of mine is bleeding. Like, we have just got into an accident. Can you please just go on and give me your phone so I can call the emergency? And you know what? If it were me, and I would be on the other side of this door, I would just go on and be like, well, how about you wait out there and I will call 911 and like, and then I'll just kind of leave you out there. Problem solved. But no, uh, we have, of course, instead, we have Mr. Alexander who's like, well, hey, like, come on, like, let him in. So Mr. Alexander's wife is to let this guy in, all of a sudden realizing that this guy is to be with a number of men that are now all wearing masks. So we have some of the gang that start to look on and are, of course, to try and see if anyone else is in this home, but they only find the two people. And so Alex starts being very creative with the lady and scissors, and as well as going and consistently kicking on the gentleman that, of course, is in this home. So while doing these things, we have, of course, Alex that is starting to Singing in the Rain. Kind of reminding me also of the moment where, after these guys are kind of done with their night, we have them back at this milk bar, and we have this woman who's singing opera, and Dim is to go on and kind of make like a farting noise, like, and Alex is to smack Dim and is to tell him, like, hey, like, don't interrupt her, because Alex was to actually like what she was doing. Dim, of course, was kind of offended by what Alex is doing, and Dim wanted to fight Alex. And so Alex is like, okay, well, let's go and fight. And then Dim is like, you know what? Like, I'm kind of tired. Let's go home. So, because, like, there really isn't much of the rest of that scene going on with that couple and the rest of that gang. So I'm not going to go back. Like, it felt like I probably left something, like, left there, but I had nothing left really there to go on and much more talk about. Besides maybe Alex going and, like, dumping, like, certain bookshelves, or there's nothing much from that scene left to really talk about without having to be very vague. So, we also, in that same night, before Alex and his gang was to make their way to this couple to do a creative thing with scissors, we had a guy named Billy Boy and his gang that were all going to have this girl and start tearing her apart. And so Alex was going and rushing in with the rest of his gang to fight against Billy Boy to stop this girl from being torn apart. So she runs off, the two gangs are fighting, and all of a sudden we hear kind of police sirens, and so both the gangs are to run off to go on and do their other activities for the rest of the night. So, after that long, long night, Alex is to come home the next, or is to come home that night and sleep till the next day, and his mother is coming to Alex's door saying, hey, it's 8 o'clock, shouldn't you be going to school? You don't want to be late. Alex is mentioning that he's sick again, and Alex's mother is like, well, you've technically been sick for a week now, and so, like, don't you want to go on to school? And Alex is like, no, still sick. Like, if anything, I'll be fine by the afternoon. So, we have both Alex's mother and father. The mother is to relate to the dad that Alex is sick, and they're just kind of, like, asking one another, it's like, well, what does he do late at night? Like, where does he seem to get this money from? And Alex's mother is like, well, he must kind of do odd jobs here and there, not quite sure. As Alex is to have this kind of drawer filled with all these things of money and these watches, and then another drawer with this snake in it. So, as Alex's parents are leaving for the day, we, of course, meet up with Alex talking to a guy named Deltoid, who I guess is some inspector. or some detective. So Alex is talking to Deltoid, and Deltoid is kind of mentioning that it seems like there's whispers going around about Alex, and that he might have gone on and done something horrible. And so Deltoid is starting to like grab on to Alex, kind of push him into this bed, and he's consistently drinking from this glass, and he's thinking that it's regular like water, but all of a sudden they have dentures inside of the water, and he's like, ugh, which I thought was so gross. But we have Deltoid that's like pushing Alex back into this bed, and he's like smacking him on the junk. And so after Alex is talking to Deltoid and eventually kind of reassuring that this guy that like he's not going to get into trouble, we then turn around and have Alex who goes to this record store who who um who an owl. uh Alex goes on to make his way through this record store because Alex is to love music. While Alex is to make his way through this record store, he meets two women that are, of course, licking these popsicles, these oddly shaped popsicles, because there's a reason for that. And so Alex is to mention to these two girls, he's like, well, hey, like what happened to yours? What happened to your, like, one of them is oddly shaped and so on and so forth. And he's like, hey, like, isn't that kind of a wasted effort? So Alex is to figure out how to smooth talk these women to his place, to where he can have a very speedily uh, moment where these characters are due to do a little bit more than listen to music. So after this whole session, we then have Alex who is to re-meet up with his gang members that are at his apartment complex. And so we have this very oddly shaped um, like art thing that of course is on this wall. And so we have Dim and Georgie on one side, and we have kind of Pete on the other. And so Alex is starting to get annoyed with these guys, these gang members, because it feels like they want to they wanted to start take control of things. Yeah. And so that leads to kind of Dim and Georgie starting to call the shots and saying like, "Hey, we want a bigger score. We want to go on and have uh, kind of this bigger payday than what we're really getting." And Alex is like, "Oh, really? So what's your master plan?" So we find out that these guys are to know about this woman who is to, I guess, live all by her lonesome, and she, of course, is to be doing yoga when we really first see her, and she, I guess, is to have a number of cats in her place. And so their idea is they think this girl has a number of gold and jewels and all kinds of things. But really, she just has these rare art pieces. So we, of course, have these men that make it to this woman's house, again, as she's doing yoga and has this weird, bizarre, huge manhood hood of a. She has this big, huge manhood freaking sculpture, which is just so weird. And it also just kind of like rocks back and forth oddly. So why, I don't know, but it's there in the film. It's kind of like Fight Club all over again, where Tyler is to meet with the one girl of the movie, and he makes it to her apartment, Marla, and all of a sudden he is to kind of put his arm against this dresser to find that there is a object there, and she's like, oh, like, uh, Like, that won't hurt you. So, we have Alex who makes his way to this door and is to play the same old shtick again. That this girl is actually realizing that this kind of lines she's being fed are the same lines that were from off of this like TV channel or this news report. So this girl is deciding to call the cops, and she's thinking like, well, like I'm gonna call you because like I think these guys are doing something shady, and so the police are coming right away. And she's like, well, like I don't think we really need to do that. I think that these guys are like uh, being people that are going to kind of wear down easily and just kind of bugger off. But we find out instead that these people try to go and find an opening throughout this home. There's like a window that's very high up. And so Alex goes on and he is to make it through this window and is to find out exactly what room this girl is in and is to find this weird um, sculpture, let's just say, and he is consistently bapping at it. And this girl's like, "Hey, you need to leave. You need to go." Like, to the point where this girl grabs this statue and she's wanting to chuck this at Alex, and Alex is dodging consistently this sculpture that she has, as well as this girl is dodging the sculpture that Alex has as he's kind of like bipping it at her. So Alex eventually falls over to have this cat lady fall on top of Alex, and so they're kind of tussling. And so Alex, at one point, is to take this huge, massive manhood sculpture and to smash this girl on the face with it. And Alex is to all of a sudden hear the police in the background. Alex is to realize that he's going to try and run off. And we finally have it to the rest of Alex's gang members turn on him, smack him with this thing of milk, causing now Alex to be blind and have like this nose injury. And so Alex is to get arrested, and he, of course, to be charged with murder, where he's going to spend 14 years in jail. So we start to have these detectives that are kind of working Alex over. They're starting to beat him up, and they're making him all bloody, and if he isn't a bloody mess already. Then Deltoid comes in, and he's telling Alex, it's like, well, hey, like there's nothing I can do to help you now. Like, if anything, you're on your own. And you're going to be spending 14 years in prison because this woman is dead. So, goodbye, you're going to go off to prison, like, where I'm sure a lot of people are going to make you their freaking puppet. So, I'm paraphrasing, but you can figure out what happens with this guy. So, Alex is to go on to prison, and so Alex quickly decides, because it seems like there's a number of guys that are looking Alex up and down and like, yeah, I'm going to give me some of that. And I'm like, oh my god. So Alex decides that he's going to find religion within prison, and he is going to consistently try and run over the pages of the Bible. And to be so well versed in him, he starts spouting a number of the verses with the preacher and so on and so forth. So it seems that Alex did weirdly have some bizarre brownie points for this preacher, and so Alex is mentioning about some treatment some new treatment that is going on called the Ludovico treatment, whatever this is. And the preacher is just like, well, I don't know, that's very experimental. I don't know. But it seems that if we really uh, don't have right away where Alex is kind of winning people over, then all of a sudden we are going to have uh, a minister that comes on in and is kind of making his way through this prison, and Alex is to kind of stand out as this guy is to go on and say, this minister, that hey, like these people will never change. Uh, they're always going to be violent and this and that. And Alex is like, you're absolutely right, sir. And he's like, what? So this minister has talked with Alex, and he's like, you know what? Like, he's the exact guy we need. He's young, and like there's like he's outspoken. There's something about him. So Alex quickly goes on and gets transitioned to be chosen for this experiment. So Alex goes on and is to speak with this doctor uh, that, of course, is kind of getting him injections, these kind of vitamins and stuff to kind of gear him up for this experiment. So Alex goes on into this movie theater, and he is to have his eyes widened, and then he keeps having these like drops being put into his eyes. I'm like, oh my god, this is freaking miserable. So Alex is to be forced to consistently be like maybe possibly manipulated or brainwashed into forcing to have his eyes be open every single second. And so they're showing him videos of the exact same stuff that he would have gone on and done at some point with his gang members, like going on and beating up one guy with a group, or we see that one girl is getting taken advantage of by a group of men. So Alex is to start watching these videos over and over while getting these drops in his eyes and consistently being like hooked up into this thing. And so Alex is going on, and finally, after consistently watching these videos, and all of a sudden he's getting like piped in like classical music. We have Alex who's mentioning that he's starting to get really sick and that he wants to like barf. And Alex is desperately asking, it's like, hey, like give me like a trash bag or give me some kind of something so I can like barf, please. So all of a sudden the doctors start asking like Alex like what he's feeling. And Alex is saying it's like, well, like I'm realizing that this is a sin and that this is wrong. And they're like, oh, so you didn't realize that before and you're realizing that now. And Alex is like, yes, sir, I'm definitely realizing that this is all wrong. So they're like, maybe we've done something here. Maybe we've gotten to this man. So after it seems like this guy has been cured, we have Alex who is to put this thing to the test via this stage performance. So Alex, as well as this minister and a number of people, are all at this proceedings. And so the first thing that happens is we have this stage actor that comes up and is to start to ridicule Alex to the point of this stage actor kind of smacking Alex in the face and kind of pressing up against him with his foot, forcing Alex to lick this guy's foot to get out of this situation, which Alex forcibly does. Then all of a sudden we have this woman who has nothing on but undies is to come into fray, and Alex is to be so tempted to just wildly touch this woman, but he can't. He has this inability to even be able to just, oh, could I just. No, Alex can't. And so immediately we would probably have a number of people that are also in like this the seats that are also just like, oh, this woman with her weird purple hair. Uh, so we have the minister and a number of other people that are realizing that Alex is cured, that he's going to go on and be able to quickly be be kind of put back into normal, uh, like he's going to be released soon is what I'm saying here. So we have this priest who's talking to this minister, and the priest is saying, it's like, well, like, wait a minute, so you're kind of torturing this man because technically he's not really given a choice to do the morally right choice. Like, he's forced into it. Like, you're kind of manipulating him and forcing him via this programming to do the right thing. Like, he probably would want to go another direction, but he's basically like a dog that has like an electrical leash that he doesn't realize he's wearing. And so it's kind of like that in this film consistently, where this guy's getting sick, he wants to Ralph, but then when all the problems go away, it seems that Alex is fine. So Alex turns around and he gets released and he's sent back to his family, his mother and father, and it seems that over time we technically have Alex's parents that have moved on to have this other man that is living with them. And so when Alex is to make his way back home, he realizes that someone else has moved into his room. And Alex is like, well, hey, like, what's going on? As Alex is to realize there's another man in his room. And so Alex is like, well, where am I going to sleep? Like, come on. Like I'm your son, kind of. And so we have this new man that is in Alex's mom and dad's life that is saying, like, well, hey, like, don't you realize what you've technically done to your mother and your father? Um, like the number of days and nights that they've cried over you and like had felt like they might have been like tortured by you at some point. They've kind of been dealing with that and yada yada yada. So Alex is to go on and leave this place while this stranger is going on and consoling both Alex's parents. So Alex goes on and is to kind of walk around the streets, just kind of going on and like he has no idea what he's going to do next because he can't go back to his old life because uh, really he can't go on and like do any kind of violence to eventually get money. He just can't. He can't mug people. He can't rob people. He has to go on and probably figure out how to get a legit job. So Alex goes on and is to bump into this homeless guy, the exact same homeless guy that he met before, where it's like, hey, can you give me some cutter, my brother? And then this homeless man is to realize, oh, it's you. So Alex is to run off to be in a sea of homeless people that are to knock Alex down, to beat him up, and is to take his items away from him. And so all of a sudden we have these police that all of a sudden grab Alex. We find out that these police members were actually Georgie and Dim. And Alex is like, oh my god, like, hey, like, my brothers, hey, like, this is great. Like, I can go on and have you guys help me. And the guys are like, oh no, I'm not helping you. Definitely not going to be helping you. So we realize that these guys like basically have a badge to be able to beat up people. And so both Dim and Georgie grab Alex and they bring him to this uh, kind of like watered bath, where they start dunking him in there for an absurd amount of time, where he basically is to drown. And so Alex kind of whips his head out of the water as the police are kind of walking on. So Alex continues to just kind of walk into any place that will kind of help him or protect him. Conveniently, we have Alex who makes his way back to Mr. Alexander's home. The guy, of course, that he sadly had beaten to death, or almost to death, and kills his wife after that whole scissors incident. So Mr. Alex is confined to a wheelchair, and so now we of course have Mr. Alexander, who now has this kind of assistant with him, this kind of big muscular guy. Um, so this big muscular guy, of which that I don't know his actual name, heaven forbid, uh, we have him go on and answer the door, and we have, of course, Alex, who's just kind of desperately asking for help. So this muscular man brings this guy in, and so Alex is to tell Mr. Alexander his story, that these policemen were beating him up, and so Mr. Alexander is like, "Oh my God, I need to call the police right away, and we need to kind of figure out like how we can help you." So Alex is going on and being in a bath. Mr. Alexander is on the phone, kind of like, "Oh, how could we kind of like take advantage of this whole thing?" So Alex all of a sudden is singing in the rain again in this bath, thinking that like, oh no, like I'm not going to be able to like get caught by Mr. Alexander, realizing that I'd invaded his home sometime before. But after Mr. Alexander is done with this phone call, he's listening to this guy singing, and he's like, "Oh my God, like this is the same guy." So Mr. Alexander brings Alex in to like drink this wine, eat this meal, and so as these two other people are coming into this place and asking Alex questions, kind of figuring out what I guess his worst weaknesses are, all of a sudden Alex is to fall over into the spaghetti, and they go on and take Alex and put him in this room, and they force him to listen to this song over and over and over again, and Alex is desperately pleading to shut this music off, so badly so that he decides to open up this window and is to jump out the window. So all of a sudden we turn around and we have Alex, who is to have a number of bones that are broken, so much so that he's in like this body cast almost, and he's been in this coma. All of a sudden we have this nurse and this doctor that are being very creative with their time together, is to all of a sudden scramble to make their way to realize that Alex is to, of course, be awake. And they're like, "Oh, doctor, he's awake." So all of a sudden, we now find out that I guess Alex's brain had been experimented on while he had been in this coma. And so Alex is talking to this nurse, and she's asking him, like, "Hey, like, tell me what you would say after this dialogue is being presented." And so Alex is kind of like insulting all these people and is talking about like, I'm sorry, lady, I'm not able to do the in and out. Like I want to go on and uh, check on other things. Like, so it seems that Alex is like seemingly back to normal as they figure out, and so all of a sudden we have Alex's mother and father that come in and they're realizing like, oh my god, like maybe this guy did want to take his own life because we like didn't bring him back into our home and we feel horrible about it. And so after Alex is done talking with his parents, we then have the minister who comes back in, who is to realize like, well, hey Alex, like, you know what, I'm sorry about like all the stuff that all the people are saying here. And so this guy's being overly nice. He's like, you know what, Alex, like I think I can give you like a really great job with a really great salary, and like I can make all your dreams kind of come true. So that, because really considering how they effed up with this guy, they're thinking that they can go and correct this thing by having good press about this and go on and like and have this guy have a good life after this, so like they can look good in the press. So really with that said, we start to have Alex who really realizes that he's back to normal, that in his head he's kind of like popping off and like seeing these scenarios where two characters are to aggressively go at it, as well as there's a number of uh, choir that is kind of singing behind them. Um, and so, like, that's how the movie oddly just wraps up, as Alex is kind of saying, it's like, well, hey, I'm back to who I am. And, like, I guess kind of mentioning that this movie could possibly go on and be like a full circle film, to where if you, like, kind of watch it in the beginning and kind of, like, eventually, if you kind of have this, like, possibly one scene that kind of full circles the movie, you could probably like come up with that in your own mind, where it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe Alex is to win back over his friends and yada yada yada. Like you can kind of go on and go into this a number of ways. But anyways, I think that technically does wrap up this movie. I think I'm gonna go on and get out of here. Uh, if there's anything that I've probably forgotten about, any little details, you can go on and correct me if you'd like within the comments below. But with anything of that, I think I'm just going to get out of here. I'm just going to go on and go. So, bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.